recording.
Yes, recording.
And we're just going to officially start. So I'm your host, Cynthia Sharp, and we'll basically be having Jude read. And then after Jude's reading tonight, we're going to have a Q&A, and people can just put their questions into the chat room, and I'll ask her what you want to know. Let's see. So first off, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight from all these different parts of our lives. Our writing mentors and colleagues, people from as far away as Michigan, people from all around our province and country, our students, our high school and university friends, the Bowen Island community, and participants from my Richmond Writer in Residence program. We're so grateful to everyone for coming out and for tuning into the YouTube video when it's up. We'd especially like to thank the League of Canadian Poets and the Federation of British Columbia Writers for sponsoring us this evening. So welcome to We Sing Ourselves Back, a Jude Neale retrospective. As many of you know, Jude Neale is a Canadian classically trained opera singer, an educator, a mentor, and a prolific poet. She was mentored by the acclaimed poet and novelist Elizabeth Harver through Humber College in Toronto. And during this 2-year process, she wrote over 500 poems and produced her first book, The Perfect Word Collapses. She then attended the Writers' Workshop at Simon Fraser University. We have a lot of people from the Writers' Studio here tonight, so thank you. It's a program initiated by Betsy Warland, where she was mentored by Rachel Rose, the former Poet Laureate of Vancouver. Jude published A Quiet Coming of Light from this experience, which went on to be a finalist for the League of Poets Pat Lowther Award. And in addition, her poem Blue Bowl was shortlisted in the prestigious Gregory O'Donoghue Poetry Prize out of Ireland. Jude's book, Splendid in Its Silence, won publication in the UK. One of the poems from that collection was chosen by the Poet Laureate of Britain, Sir Andrew Motion, to ride on buses through the Channel Islands. Jude was also the feature reader at the Guernsey International Literary Festival in the UK. She then collaborated with Bonnie Nish, the executive director of Word Vancouver, to produce Cantata in 2 Voices, which was published by Ecstasis Editions. And this book was written in just 50 days total. She has been widely published nationally and internationally, and as you know, has written 10 books. Her most recent one was written just this past June when she was the writer in residence for the Joy Kogawa House. So be sure to look for that in the coming year. Her first 4 books are available directly from her by emailing judescool@hotmail.com, which I posted in the chat room. And others can be purchased from Ecstasis Editions, which is also in the chat room, the link to it. Jude has collaborated with dancers, musicians, and other poets, which she wrote about for the League of Canadian Poets in her article, Sum of All Parts, for the League's Women and Multimedia Chapbook in 2016. You can also learn more about Jude from her website, which I'll post in the chat room as well. Jude enjoys giving readings best of everything in poetry because that's when she can deeply connect with her audience. So please welcome Jude Neale. Hope to clap silently. Please welcome Jude Neale, who'll be reading tonight from all 10 books.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Cynthia. It makes it sound so amazingly daunting that I'm reading from 10 books, but I promise I'll keep under half an hour. It's so good to see that so many people have turned out, and I will begin from reading from this book, The Perfect Word Collapses, and it's the poem called Breaking the Sky at Midnight. They thrummed across the midnight sky, trailing the banner of spring in their beaks. The bragging beat of wings shifted the air to the one-armed cedar that held the moon in its sight. Shadows plucked the tune of my wonder as I opened my doorway and danced. The next poem reflects a period of time in my life when I was going through depression and I had children, and this is what it's like as to be depressed around kids. It's called Her Small Breath. My being clenched in a chemical straitjacket, as tough as any Kevlar vest or stranger's lean stare, coiled like a sniper. Depression, counting the fluorescent sheep on the ceiling that my daughter's fingers placed there. I'd lie waiting for rage to enter me like a flame, not safe in my closet of velvet and lace, buried in clothes that no longer grace who I was once. Whispered longing from outside the closed door. Are you awake, Mom? All I can do is sigh, yes, praying that this single word will carry my longing to plummet, to be set free. Feeling her way across the dark carpet, her small breath grazes my cheek. She curves my fingers round the mug's sturdy handle and says, drink. Held close to gasp like a fish, my story of clamped beginnings, stifled cries. I swell like a sponge to press my love to my shoulder, then pull the net round my heart so she cannot touch me. My mother, my daughter, my own. Small deaths from words. Small deaths from words hidden in corners, snipers rendering me white, solid as a mausoleum closed tight behind memory's eyes. The flutter of a sparrow, jagged crossings to the one-armed maple, and then again to the oval hole in the sun-warmed wall. The house where I once measured mornings with silence, the slow drip of coffee. You suck the pulse at my throat, greedy wet lamb. The next poem is about my father. He had Parkinson's and he didn't like visitors. He didn't like to be seen that way. So this poem is about that, and it's called Bone to Greenberry. His cigar smoke curtains the dimly lit room, but still I watch him, amazed. I pluck the words from the tip of his tongue. Bitter is the taste of bone to greenberry. He hides from well-wishers who carry their embers of sorrow in brown paper bags. Somewhere between his tethering loneliness and his desire to fly, he hums a dark tune. It sticks like diamond dust to the back of my throat. I understand for the very first time that the leaving is hard and staying impossible. Long before he draws his last breath, filled with the sea and the smudge of the cold gray sky. Morning in Venice. The morning splits open, ripe with espresso and oranges. Wind snatches at my hair, plays a tango on the mirrored hem of the Indian skirt from Bombay. The one-eyed beggar leads me down fetid alleyways to crouch in the dark, where I gleam and want. The moon dips deep into the canal, swallowed like a ripe plum. I hum an anthem flung from my slim bag of yesterday's sorrow. I'll be reading from A Quiet Coming of Light next. This is a picture of our little mountain on Bowen. It's called Mount Gardner, and this is a picture of it at the top. I'm going to read the introduction to this book. Great grief and indigo darkness are the places where you learn what is real. I have spent my life searching for a fairy tale ending to ease my despair. Then, one morning, the world was swollen with light so bright, I wanted to press it into a golden book of poems. I do not trust each shiny day, but I'm cautiously grateful for my glimpse into the spectacular. I'd like to begin with Places Beyond. I see the sky, unbuttoned by wishes, places beyond where life splits, sparkles. I follow the swings arc to recover my intake of breath, the heart-stopping happiness, so transient for one whose weakness is hanging her childhood out to dry. A Quiet Coming of Light is the name of my book, and it's also the name of one of the poems in it. And this poem won third place in a competition in Britain of 3,000 other poems. And so I was very honored to become third place, let me tell you. People identify with this one, I think. Aging hits us all. A spray of moonlight fell like pewter beads onto the petaled earth. I made up sly Russian dance steps to ambush you, a curl of smoke crawling under a tightly closed door. But, oh, dearest husband, now my hair, white as china and brittle as branches, and I still want you to want me more than my own small complaints. I kept your life secrets taped to my mattress in drawers with no handles and cuttlebone knives. I wore you like perfume under the moon with the roses. Your skin stretched and settled round mine. I remember the press of your lips on the pathway when we became part of a quiet coming of light. This book won publication in Britain, and I was so lucky to have it published in London. And I got to meet the publisher and everything. And so I'm going to read a poem that Rachel Rose and I she inspired me to write this. She said that there was a female poet in the States who said, you should write about something you're good at and really exaggerate it. So I wrote, well, I'm good at loving. And so this is called the Love Brag Poem. Yeah, I know how to please. I'm a celestial choir and sing my proud anthem with one mighty moan. I show the boys a black and white photo of my silky thigh bones, and who is to blame? I'm the golden goddess of pleasure, and am graced by fine hands and a musk-scented stride. It's more than rumor that brings them to my ripe acres of heat. I lie each of them down, awake and asleep, where they give way like ship's timber and howl back at me, queen of the boudoir, waker of dreams. I'm here to tell all. It's just what it seems. The moon. The moon is an eggshell offering and is above you in the pecking order. She is the ice cream melting in a cobalt dish. The moon rocks the orchard and is in your bucket twice. She is a ventriloquist sign behind a mask in Venice. She is an angler for love and warms up her voice in the river. The moon floods out the roads in your head every now and then. Feathers gathered, feathers lost. This poem was written for the Jewish Community Center after an exhibit that I saw, and it's about gossip. And in the Torah, this is one of the more sinful things that can happen. And so there's a lot of talk in the Torah about gossip, and I spoke to that. We speak them into shadowed lives. They balloon our dry throats with malice and the recognizable gossip of our station and design. These words drift like pollen over sleepy, blank tongues, eager for a bitter taste to inform them of the hard rub of someone else's slim bag of misery. We ask ourselves, who are we to paint you with such sticky tar, casting stones at your blind innocence? Now we try to gather back the words that have stained your spotless name. The wind lifts the feathered flutter of these secrets and lies, and it blows them clean away from our undeserving eyes. We promise we're sorry and won't whisper again the mean truths that held your face to the night. The next book I'm going to read from is Cantata in Two Voices by Bonnie Nish and myself. And I'd like to read the introduction to that so you would have some idea of what we did. It was a delight and challenge to weave Bonnie Nish and my poetic voices into a single book of poems. We took turns choosing the epigraph and all subsequent responses to this trigger. We met in person only once and conceived and created each poem on the internet with one writer taking on the job of editor. We felt we needed to have a consistent eye to allow both voices to be heard in a unified form. As the work unfolded, our voices began to dance, but quickly turned closely around one another, unique but usually in sync. The final edits caught the spaces where we had stepped too far. And here's the first epigraph we had to write about. In the mountains, stillness, after Goethe by Robert Haas. And this poem is called Rebirth. I come to this place to find the depth of wonderment I have lost in ordinary life. The pine-scented earth gives up its light, and my bruises fall away. I am once again whole. My toes inhale the raspy air, and I move like a mountain spring, coming back to its source. Now I can open and bloom and spread out into the dusk, where lupins and Indian paintbrush carpet the scree. Slashes of purple-throated fireweed snatches at my breath. Night begins to fall, and everything silent holds me. The epigraph we had to write to this time was by Mark Strand, and it is this: there is no happiness like mine. I have been eating poetry. Ink runs from the corners of my mouth. And it's entitled The Word. I string words like pearls across the verdant landscape of my mind. They walk with me, every mile held together with meaning so clear that the nouns and verbs paint a pointless painting. My fingers are slick with rhyme, and I am thrown back into a dizzying reverie of mood and distance. I catch them like starfish and press each one of them firmly onto my fresh page, where they stand together, sway with context or whimsy. I write a poem, juicy as a wet pomegranate dripping down hot flesh, or find one hiding shyly in the dusty recesses of stubborn memory. All of this I know today, when all I asked for was just one good line, stuck together with the paste of living and the hardship's slow grind. The next poem I like to read to you is called About Light, and it was a finalist for the Pulp Literature Award, Magpie Award, and it's about how we depend on others. So, about light. I could have died on this road alone, but the fever of your touch. You pull off my naked loneliness and lessen this wake I drag behind me like a stillborn. You name my doddering illness that hides in a bucket of shame. I'm sorry I forgot how to think about light, trapped, curious, curled words clasped in my trembling hands. I hope you will love me, despite endings when I don't die with longing. I don't even die for your lips to press like wet poppies onto my white waxen face. In the end, we carry nothing but stones and skin knees down to the river. Bruised and broken, we aren't afraid. We teeter onto one another's empty stage, arms suspended like angels before the fall. Ode to Plankton, Dinoflagellatus. It's September in the Pacific Northwest, and the moon is shrouded in cloud. I've calculated air and water temperature, a variance of only 2 degrees. It's midnight when we take the path down to the ocean, pull off my dress, and experiment with the tongue of night air on my skin. It's all right. Dare myself to walk in without flinching. Don't care about the sharp cold as my cupped palms trap the phosphorescence before it falls like beads back into the water. I'm part of a glazed design buried in the obsidian sea. I float beside you tonight. We are silver flotsam, our bodies indelibly outlined with the wash of tiny lights. Impromptu was the book I wrote in April. I relaunched it in May 2020, this year. And the prompt was take 2 or 3 issues, combine and meld them into one poem. So I did. And this poem is called Shelter. Your little face is pink from crying. The pain runs through me, and I walk in circles again. Don't wake up. The walls push me further in. My breath is labored, haunted. Your ice blue eyes watch without judgment. I want to pick you up, brush away your grief, but I care too deeply about things I can do nothing about. Let me cup your head in my palm. Remember the times I was lost and you found me. I whisper my love back into the conch of your ear. Sleep, my child. Nothing matters more than this peace you carry. Prompt 14. Add a day to a month and tell what you do with it. One day in June. It would be June I'd hang on to. Her bowered floribunda roses and the crimson taste of strawberries. Sit in the sweet green grass and tilt my head towards the morning light. I dance barefoot on the wet cement path and exclaim at the fullness of the blood moon. The spears of foxglove would echo back the robin's song from the perfect purple symmetry. I would dress in white lace and a bowler hat trimmed in buttonhole daisies. I'd eat the orange peppery glory of nasturtiums in my salad. This one day, I wouldn't just walk, but would skip and swoop, tasting freedom at this estuary of my life. The next book I don't have to show you, but it is coming out in January from Ecstasis Editions. It's called The River Answers, and I'd like to read for you the poem that the book is named for. The River Answers. I would pin your memory to the river, Nana, to make you stay. You flash your quick silver smile at the camera, but what did you see beyond the lens? Were the mountains spruce blue and the water roiling at the confluence? Did you stop to see the dragonfly hover over the rock, then lift off, a blur of cobalt and green? Did your tongue gladden at the small wild berries that filled the bushes with a glazed purple hue? Did you gasp at the sound of your own velvet voice returning back and back again from canyons above? Did you smell the coming of the quenching rain which soothed the sweltering heat of a July afternoon in the Rockies? You were sap happy in summer, grateful for the abundant possibilities laid before you at your table of plenty. The river remembers me standing behind you, following your life like a map. In praise of shadow and light, inspired by Dearly Beloved, a poem by a fine poet called Heidi Greco, who lives in Vancouver. Broken in clothes are always the best for kneeling too long in the wet fall soil, coaxing the last sprig of blush to open-throated bloom, a singular burst of color. I am humbled by form, so like an anthem in praise of shadow and light. Your glory springs from cold nights and low gray days. I breathe you in, am suffused with the faint perfume of summer in the graze of a silken petal against the question of my upturned mouth. And lastly, I'd like to read from a book I just found out today is getting published. It's called Inside the Pearl. It is a book of haiku I wrote at Joy Kagawa House, and that was quite a learning curve because I found out what a haiku wasn't. So I'm going to read you 3 haiku, and I hope you enjoy them, and they'll be my last. Nisei children balance bowls of rice, chopsticks, chirp. Calligraphy brush, hidden in the carved case. Your hand, a dove. Hollow bowl, plump cherries. Small fingers, choosing. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That is 10 years worth.
Thank you so much, Jude. I love how much of yourself you put into your readings. People have been commenting on that through the chat. So we have time for some questions for Jude. So if you have a question for her, if you could just type it into the chat, I'll ask her. And while I'm waiting for people, lots of people are clapping in chat, and you have lots of thank yous, so you better take a look. And I want to know, Jude, 10 years, 10 books is a long journey. What surprised you along the way about writing poetry?
Nothing surprised. What surprised me is I've gotten to 10 books because I went poem by poem, and most of them I've written on my phone, so it's been very laborious. I write my poetry on my phone, on notes. And gradually the one book turned into two, and then I'd write a bunch more, and before I knew it, I had 10, and I have at least another 400 on my computer that I haven't used.
Wow. So how do you decide what to use and what to let just stay on your computer?
I have a certain level of excellence, and if I see anything that's shaky or cliche or not evocative enough, I save it, and maybe we'll come back to it another time and use a line and perhaps be inspired to write another poem.
And what were some of the highlights of your poetry career?
I think going to Guernsey Poetry Festival and reading there at St. Peter's Port. That was such an amazing experience to be with poets from around the world and read on this small little island and share my very Canadian views with the international audience. And also, what else? I think winning the Gregory O'Donoghue Finalist Award was also a big one for me, because there were so many people who entered that, thousands, and I thought Blue Bowl that I won for was such a small poem of 90 words. I was shocked that it moved the judges to pick me.
An amazing poem. It's one of my favorites by you. So you can see you have some questions here. Dennis White is asking, lovely free verse. Do you write rhymed poetry as well?
I have, Dennis. I've written just recently, that'll be in my new book. I have written a John Prine poem. When he died, it meant a lot to me, and I wrote a response in a song, lyrics, a 6-verse rhyming poem, and several other. I've got about 4 in this new book. So I do it. I try and do internal rhyme, external rhyme, and I play around with it. I'm not as comfortable with it as I am with free verse, because I want to be subtle, and I often find that rhyming poetry isn't subtle enough for me.
So Janet Qualman says, thank you so much. I'm curious after the last comment about your new book, Inside the Pearl. Jude, you say you found out what a haiku wasn't. I learned a lot from this too. Congrats on the publication. Also, what river inspired your book, The River Answers? The Fraser is my muse. That's Janet Qualman. So what is a haiku not, and what river inspired The River Answers?
What a haiku is 575, and I was shocked, because I wrote this book of haiku when I was at Joy Kagawa House, and I showed it to the person who was in charge, and she was so excited that I'd written 60 haiku that she sent it off to a haiku award winner who won the League's award 2 years ago for haiku, and said, what do you think of these? And much to my horror, she said, they're not haiku. 575, no. And so I had to change completely every poem. I think I went through each poem 10 different edits. It took me the longest to write this book, because I was so determined to get a perfect haiku. It was something that would represent modern times. And the haiku in my book is about objects I found in Joy Kagawa House, and I wrote to them. So that is where I got my inspiration for writing. Everything is about something I saw in the house. And Joy Kagawa House Society is sponsoring me to publish this book. So they have such belief in me that they are using this book as their book from now on, and will be selling it at their house to authors from around the world and putting it in the archives and stuff. Yes.
Hello, this is Herb. Could I ask, what is a haiku then?
It's the first, I have to get my book.
Which one?
The black one. Just a minute, Herb.
Okay.
For instance, the first line, I have many poems in here that are only a total of 12 syllables altogether, not 17. And the first two lines go together, but are broken up and can be read separately. And the last line has to refer to the first line. So for instance, calligraphy brush, hidden in the carved case, your hand, a dove, and that's the difference.
Wow. We have all been misinformed.
I know, and our teachers taught us that.
But now we're learning, teachers are learning too. So also, Jude, Janet wants to know what river inspired the River Answers?
Let me look, Cynthia, I have to look and see. The River Answers. I think it was Thompson River for me. Well, that was where my nana was from, and that's where I spent many summers on the North Thompson River up in Blue River in the Rockies. So the Thompson River is the big one for me.
We have a nice question here. Stephen Carr wants to know, how does your vocal training influence your passionate delivery?
Good question, Stephen. I think it's probably been the most important factor in my readings. As you know, I was a professional singer, and I know how to deliver words vocally, and it's easy to transfer it over to poetry because, to me, poetry is music, and I think along those lines when I write.
So I think that's, I think we've answered all the questions. So I think maybe we'll stop just to thank Jude and thank everyone for coming out. So we're especially grateful to people for giving up your summer evening and coming out tonight to listen to Jude's beautiful poetry. We also want to thank the League of Canadian Poets who are sponsoring us tonight, and the Federation of BC Writers, and of course Jude for performing for us.
And thank you so much for coming out and listening to me on this beautiful evening. You've made a wonderful evening for me. What a time to go back and to find my first book and read from it and find it didn't suffer too badly through the years. Thank you.